Hi, Eric here to talk a little bit more about one of the past videos that I just did that talked about symmetrical re-education of the shoulder complex. So if there's impingement or injury on one side of the body, don't neglect the other. We might have to re-educate that piece as well. This video was spurred by a question from a friend of mine, Kevin Dean, on Facebook. And he had mentioned if there was a transverse plane deviation or compensation, what could be driving that? We're going to take some superficial looks at some things that could drive a transverse plane deviation through the shoulder complex. First of which is we'll discuss the posterior oblique subsystem. So if we think about the hip and the shoulder, they're intimately related. In the front we have the anterior oblique subsystem, and the backside the posterior oblique subsystem. So if we think muscularly and just locally at the fascia through the thoracolumbar fascia, the glute on the left side and the lat on the right side work to help propel us forward through the gait cycle. So I'm going to turn my back just to demonstrate or highlight the relationship that the glute can have on the lat. In this scenario, we'll discuss someone who has a posterior rotation on the left side of the pelvis. That could be tight hamstring, tight adductor complex, something on the other side. Insert the driver here, okay? I'm not talking about what's causing it, but if someone is shifted posteriorly on the left side of the body, how can that impact either a frontal plane deviation on the right side or a transverse plane deviation? So let's take a quick peek at that as I turn around. So if someone goes posteriorly, creating tension through here, it's going to pull through the top of the shoulder. And you might have this compensation. It might appear from the front like it's a frontal plane deviation from an anterior view. If we couple that with the anterior oblique subsystem, if someone is rotated posteriorly on the left hip, then what we tend to see during functional movement patterns like an overhead squat or even a single leg squat is we tend to see the knee move out. I tend to see the knee move out more often than I see it dive in, indicating synergistic dominance of the piriformis and potentially the TFL, any of the abductors of the hip taking over for the weak gluteal complex. And yes, there's a motor learning issue here too. But from the front, we think of the adductor complex, how it's interwoven fascially through the external oblique, and how the shoulder is intimately tied in fascially, and potentially muscularly when we look at the serratus anterior as well, and the pectoral complex with this section. So if I have these muscles that run from the thigh all the way up through the external oblique, and my femur on the left side is abducting, I'm going posterior and abducting, what tends to happen is we get pulled like this. So if I'm already getting pulled in the frontal plane, down and in by the lat on this right side, then I might get an exaggerated compensation to get some trunk rotation in through this way. And this is pretty common since most of us are right-hand dominant and we're slumped and rounded like this. It's part of that common compensatory pattern that you'll see in osteopathic literature. There can be many other drivers, there can be many other things, but just chew on those two things. And if you also wanted to superimpose Myers anatomy trains on top of this, whether you're talking about the lateral line up the side of the body, whether you're talking about the spiral line, how it's going to run out through the body as well, up across here, or whether you're going to have the superficial front line here, superficial front line up through here, superficial back line. You can also look at the fascial anatomy as a driver. So the question is what's going to cause a transverse plane or a frontal plane deviation? It could be local, but I encourage you to look at the opposite hip and thigh, see what's happening there, and of course, take a look at the entire kinetic chain for other information or factors that might be driving that. It's not always just the shoulder. Remember, the source of pain is rarely the source of movement impairment. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.